Welcome everybody to the F4 Hunger Awareness Show.
It's my goal to feed 1 billion people before I die.
We want to bring awareness around the issue of hunger and food insecurity.
7 to 8 million people served so far, with the sole goal of eradicating world hunger by connecting sources of food to recipients in need. Fiorenza's Food for Friends.
Derek Fiorenza here on the F4 Hunger Awareness Show. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about hunger and food insecurity in New York. We'll talk at a state level and also on a city level. I had an opportunity this past week to visit New York. I was visiting with some clients, and one of the things that I was doing when I was there was just doing some research on hunger and food insecurity, specifically in New York City. So here are some statistics that I wanted to share. And these are all relatively recent. These are all 2026, according to Feeding America. The food insecurity rate in New York City is between 14.5% to 15%. That represents between 1.2 and 1.4 million people. As we always say, food insecurity, not knowing when you're going to eat again, not knowing where that meal is coming from. So an absolutely awful spot to be in, suffering from food insecurity. The childhood hunger rate is nearly 25%. So 1 in 4 children are also living food insecure out of that 1.4 million individuals in New York City. And we're also seeing the poverty rate between 25 and 26%. That represents around 2.2 million people. So that's just in the city, in New York City. So hunger and food insecurity. And some of these levels, they're saying, according to the Feeding America statistics, are the highest that they've been in the past 5 years. When we look a little broader at New York State as a whole, the food insecurity rate is between 10.4% and 14%. So that represents around 2.8 million, just under 3 million people. The childhood hunger rate statewide is around 20%. So 1 out of 5 children are food insecure. And the overall poverty rate, it's a little bit less than in the city, but it's still pretty high, between 15 and 17.5%. So these are statistics that are in 2026. There's a couple things that are happening, a couple reasons for some of these issues that we're seeing and experiencing in New York. So some of the statistics are being driven by socioeconomic issues. Certain communities are more marginalized and suffering from greater food insecurity rates than others. We're seeing it's twice as high for Black and Hispanic New York areas compared to white and Asian American residents. There's also a pretty big meal gap. The average cost of a meal in New York has risen to $3.78 statewide, while in New York City, it's even higher. So the average meal costs $4.86. And I can attest, I was walking through the city this past week, and even looking at some of the menus as I was walking down the street of the cost of a sandwich. It was $16, $17 for a sandwich. And obviously the cost of goods have gone up. So, the cost of rent goes up. So the restaurants have to, keep prices up just to, make their bills. So obviously it's not, necessarily their fault. It's just everything has gone up in price, which is causing a strain on so many people. Lastly, there is an emergency food strain. So we're seeing an increase in visits to New York City food pantries and soup kitchens. It's surged compared to pre-pandemic levels by almost 90%, 89%. And that is provided by the Community Service Society of New York, that data point. Um, Tackling some of those primary causes of hunger. So what are they? The current crisis, as we were alluding to, is not just about food, but it's due to some economic and policy failures. So number one, affordability. Whenever you see hunger and poverty, there's typically some type of an affordability crisis. So we've seen inflation, the cost of goods have gone up, and wages have not kept pace commensurately. Specifically around food inflation, the grocery prices in the New York City metro area have increased since 2019 between 23.5% and 25%. You throw in with that stagnant wages. So for a lot of people that are living in New York City working, income is not keeping pace with those costs. 46% of working age New York City households earn less than what's called the true cost of living. So what that means essentially is they can't afford basic necessities like rent and food. So imagine having to make a decision, pay your rent or feed your family. And unfortunately, too many Americans, especially those that are here in New York City, are facing that decision every single day. That's why it's important that we bring awareness to this massive issue and we do what we can directing resources to support these individuals. And there's many ways that we can support. It doesn't always have to be financially. We can follow information that F4 is sharing. Following us, we'll continue to provide information. And then volunteering. Maybe there's an opportunity to give back at your local food bank or pantry or shelter. Maybe you can donate meals. You can donate money to some of these missions that are serving or help with providing opportunities where jobs might not currently exist through connections and introductions. There's always a way to leverage your own network. So we always, degree of separation. We might know somebody that knows somebody that can help. So kind of thinking deeper about this and making this problem, which seems so broad and large, more manageable and truncating it, shrinking it down so that we can get our hands around it. Maybe it's $1, one meal, one follow, one like. There's many ways to make an impact in this issue of hunger and food insecurity. We're also seeing an increase in rents. So since 2020, rents are up 27%, 27.1%. That's according to the New York City Council. This is forcing families to prioritize housing over nutrition. And if we think about different times of the year, New York City, New York, it's in the Northeast. So, you have exceptionally cold winters and then you have hotter summers. So you have usually air conditioning you want to use in the summer and heat in the winter. So that increases utility bills. It's not like we have a climate that's just temperate and moderate all year round. So there is that strain as well. So that decision to make your home warm in the winter, we call it heating versus eating, that becomes an issue that too many families are facing. Um, the second leg is federal policy shifts and benefits cuts. So SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, there has been changes in 2025 that had some effects on some of the food banks and food pantries that are providing food to those in need. Additionally, there have been imposed stricter able-bodied adult without dependents work requirements. So this requires many of the adults between the ages of 18 and 64 to document a minimum of 80 hours of work per month to keep those benefits. And then lastly, we're seeing some what they call administrative churn. So it's a complicated recertification and reporting rules that are leading many eligible people to lose benefits due to paperwork errors rather than a change in income. So those are things that obviously this is not a political show, but we do want to make sure that people are having an opportunity to get access to the benefits that they so rightfully deserve. So bringing attention to this issue and making sure that people are aware of these issues, hopefully they can get resolved and rectified to help those people that are most in need. And then we focus a little bit on some systematic disparities. So one thing that we've talked about in the past on past shows are food deserts. So another example of a food desert, but financially would be a resource desert. So many low-income neighborhoods, particularly those situated in the Bronx, they suffer from a lack of affordable grocery stores. This forces the residents of those communities to rely on more expensive local options. So that's one big challenge. Number two, health and disabilities. So New York has those individuals living in New York with health problems or disabilities, they might face higher, material hardships as their medical expenses will also impact their ability to spend on food. So again, that is also information that's provided from the New York City Council. So according to the news, the Center on Poverty and Social Policy said that 2.2 million New Yorkers are living in poverty. So those are a few things that are happening. Focusing on that affordability gap, here's a couple of stats that I wanted to share around the true cost of living. Nearly half, or 46% of working age New York City households earn less than what is needed to cover basic expenses like rent and utilities. That persistent inflation that we mentioned, so the average meal costing $4.86, it's been an increase of almost 25% since 2019, 2020, which is pre-pandemic. And then household debt. Many households are faced with rising costs. Over half of New Yorkers, around 50%, report that they have taken on debt just to buy groceries, while 28% are now using buy now, pay later services for food. And then lastly, on this economic front, the rent food conflict, we've covered it. your rent costs and the food costs. Rent costs typically are higher. They're not maintaining the wages, not maintaining the ability to cover the cost of rent and to cover the cost of food. We've covered the policies, some of those policies around SNAP, a couple other things to kind of communicate here. The documented hours has gone up. Participation drop. New York City has seen a 5.5% decline in SNAP benefits participation, which has affected over 100,000 residents due to some of these new rules and administrative barriers that have come into play. Additionally, some advocates warn that federal SNAP cuts could push an additional 70,000 New Yorkers into poverty annually. And that is from the Alliance to End Hunger. So that's one of the potential effects of that policy change. Then we cover social drivers, so some systematic disparities, and we'll kind of finish up here. Racial inequality. I mentioned how Black and Hispanic New Yorkers are facing stronger, I guess, needs than their counterparts, white and Asian Americans. So they're twice as likely to experience food insufficiency. Additionally, those research deserts, it affects around 750,000 residents in New York. So fresh produce in these areas is expensive or scarce, so it's hard to come by. And then geographic concentration. So areas hit hardest by hunger would be the Bronx. Neighborhoods like West Farms see food insecurity rates as high as 35%. And then lastly, I mentioned the childhood hunger crisis in the state. 1 in 5 children are hungry. In New York City, 1 in 4 kids are hungry, and that information comes from the City Harvest. So they talk about some childhood hunger and how many working households are facing that. So all in all, there is a lot that needs to be done. This is just specifically New York, but I wanted to do some research and do a podcast on hunger in New York around food insecurity because I was there this past week and I wanted to shed light on some of the issues that are plaguing the city and so many of the individual residents in New York and so many of the families. So we offer our prayers and ways that we can help. We can volunteer. You can follow F4, subscribe to our information, our podcast, follow us on social media. We're constantly trying to provide ways and to help out and get involved. If you live in New York City and you want to get involved, we can connect you to a food bank or a food pantry that could then utilize your resources financially or your time and energy to serve that community. If you have a business and you'd like to help out in New York, we could do a food drive to support a local food pantry and discuss other avenues of support and participation. So thank you for your listening and thank you for your attention to everything we shared today. We'll continue to pray and hope that things improve in New York and all over the country and all over the world. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be able to share information that does create additional awareness for hunger and food insecurity. You can help us out by subscribing to our channel and follow us on social media. As always, I'm Derek Fiorenza. It's a privilege and an honor. I'm with Fiorenza's Food for Friends, and this is the F4 Hunger Awareness Show. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much.